Hi, we're Quentin Curious Volumes. My name is James. A couple of months ago, maybe it's been a month ago, doesn't matter, I made a series of two videos on the Western Canon Starter Kit. And the Western Canon Starter Kit was a list of books um, created by booktuber and book reviewer Steve Donahue. About 7 years ago, he made this series of videos in which he went through, in chronological order, a series of books that he thought a person could reasonably get through in a year or two of part-time reading and would get them up to speed on the works that had cast the longest shadow over subsequent Western literature. And he had a couple of rules, and I'll briefly go over them again. One was there's no wrong way to enjoy reading. You don't need to care about the tradition. So if you don't want to read the books on his list, if you don't want to read the Iliad, there's nothing wrong with not reading the Iliad. Um, Number two, given number one, there is a right way to pursue reading if you want to become versed in these works of Western literature. The wrong way is haphazard, and the right way is systematic, and a system is linear, and a system is chronological, because writers happen in series, and one writer influences the next writer, influences the next writer. And number three, what we're talking about is the Western canon, and there's not an alternate canon. So these are the works that are most influential to writers in the Western tradition, so not the Tale of Genji or the Mahabharata. So, from time to time, Steve has teased making a sophomore year of the Western Canon Starter Kit, or a part two. And I have, for some time, been creating my own sort of draft of what I suspect he might put on it. And interestingly, over the past few weeks, he's been putting out a series of videos, 10 at a time, of the, well, 10 books per video of the 100 greatest books of all time. I think he's up to 50 now, which is kind of a part two. It's not in chronological order. It does include works from China and Japan and India, so not strictly Western. Uh, and there's not a lot of overlap with the Western Canon Starter Kit. So this might effectively be a part two, but I'll leave that for him to say. Um, and I'll tell you my thoughts on what I think might be a second one. And I'll tell you also, some of these I've read, a lot of them I haven't. But there are things that I have seen reference to in subsequent literature in the books in the first Western Canon series. So these are books that probably should be read maybe by me if I want to continue being the sort of snooty person who's like, well, anyway. So the first video that he does is on the Bible, and he has a subset of books of the Bible that he says contain the most narrative thrust and the most literary influence. In the Old Testament, that's Genesis and Exodus, and then skipping ahead to Joshua, Judges, Ruth, and etc. So I would suggest that probably in a part two you would read all the rest of the Bible, and if not all the rest of it, um, four more books. So that would be the other three books of Moses. So Genesis and Exodus are the first two books of Moses. Then Leviticus and Deuteronomy and Numbers are the other five. Together they constitute the Torah, or the core of the Jewish tradition, and that's kind of a complete set. And then after that, it picks up. The Old Testament continues with Joshua, Judges, and Ruth, etc. And so I think for completeness of the Torah, the books of Moses, or the Pentateuch, um, different names for the same 5 books, you would read those. Um, I understand why Leviticus and Deuteronomy are not on there because they are the ones with the most um, empty prophesying and dietary restrictions and ways of slaughtering animals, which are not really relevant. But certainly these are very influential books. And the Book of Numbers has some narrative importance. It kind of wraps up the story of Moses. The tradition is that the 5 books of Moses, which Numbers is the last one, were written by Moses. Of course, in the Book of Numbers, Moses dies, so that throws a wrench into that, certainly. But that's tradition. That's not what scholars have said. All right, so those 3, and then the 4th one is from the New Testament, and Steve's list for the New Testament is the 4 Gospels, the Book of Acts, and then all the epistles of St. Paul, which is most of the New Testament. Then there are, sort of lesser epistle writers, and finally Revelation. And I would suggest that you will at least read Revelation. It is empty prophesying, but it is very influential on subsequent literature and popular culture and art. It's kind of the most phantasmagorical, psychedelic book of the Bible. So if we're reading for things that have cast a long shadow, the book of Revelation, I think, certainly counts. So read those 5 books of the Bible, or just read the rest of the Bible, would probably be the second part. Then the kit moves on to the ancient Greeks, specifically Homer, and you read the Iliad, and you read the Odyssey, and then there's actually it's a really solid selection of philosophy and drama, with mostly the tragic drama with one comedy thrown in, and then there was another genre that the ancient Greeks excelled in, which was history, and there's no history, so probably I would speculate that Herodotus's histories and Thucydides' book, The Peloponnesian War, would be the 2 histories that are the most important if you're talking about the ancient Greeks. So those are on my draft of the sophomore year Western Canon Starter Kit. How weirdly referential this video is, but for those who like it, here it is. Then the ancient Romans. So Steve has the Aeneid of Virgil and Ovid's Metamorphoses. It's hard to think of any 3rd or 4th book that has as much influence as those 2. Livy, maybe. Caesar was very widely read. I don't think he's considered to be a very high literary quality. There were the Roman philosophers like Seneca, Marcus Aurelius, Lucretius. Lucretius was on the list of 100 greatest books of all time, so maybe that would be on there. But honestly, I don't know what Steve would pick for the Romans after the big 2 that he already named. So I'm punting on that. I just don't know. Plutarch, I think, wrote in Greek, though he wrote a lot about the ancient Romans. So maybe that would be an easy pick. But I just don't know. So I'm going to move on to the medievals, where I have more concrete thoughts. So I do think Boethius will be on there, the Consolation of Philosophy, which kind of sums up a lot of theology and philosophy in the early Christian era. I think that the Confessions of St. Augustine will be on there, and possibly the City of God. I haven't read either of those. I have read Boethius. I read it in a medieval literature class in college, so it has been a long time, but I did like it. I found it very interesting. I also read another that I think would be on there, which is The Romance of the Rose, which was one of the most widely read um, books. It's an allegory about courtly love. Um, and I think that after Boethius and the Bible, it was the most read book of the Middle Ages. So is what I would guess. Is Augustine, Boethius, and Romance of the Rose would be added to the medieval list. In the Renaissance, I'm not so sure, but I think that Orlando Furioso possibly. I know Orlando Furioso is extremely long, and it is also on the Steve's 100 Greatest Books of All Time, so there's a good chance that that would be on there. Um, and then you've probably noticed, if you followed the Western Canon Starter Kit, that after the Renaissance, all the writers are English except for one. Well, they're writing in the English language, um, and I think that there are some other English novelists that would be probably included. Tom Jones by Henry Fielding, Tristan Shandy I think would be on there, and mm, maybe something by Thomas Hardy. I don't know. I think he would include the Romantics, the English Romantic poets, Coleridge, Wordsworth, and Blake, and Byron, Keats, and Shelley. Probably a selection of those poets who are certainly very influential. And then I think he would probably want to fill in some of the other Western uh, traditions, particularly the French and the German, or rather the French and the Russians. So I think probably we would have something by Victor Hugo, maybe Les Miserables. I know he's not a fan. Probably Madame Bovary, maybe something by Dumas, something by Proust, perhaps. Although now we're getting into modernism, but some subset of these French authors would probably be included. And for the Russians, I I would guess that would be one where he would say, as when he said you have to read all of Shakespeare. Um, he would say you have to read the two big Tolstoy novels, War and Peace and Anna Karenina. He'd probably recommend um, the Brothers Karamazov or Crime and Punishment, and maybe some other Russian writer. But that is my guess. Would he include a German such as Goethe? Would he include Faust? Certainly a very influential story. Maybe we'd have Goethe's Faust. That's my guess. Uh, Trying to read the mind of another booktuber who has read way more than me or probably you um, this is a fool's errand. Well, just call me a fool. I have nothing else to do today. It's my day off. My wife is out. My dog is resting comfortably. It's storming outside. I can just sit here and speculate on this foolishness. Um, Lately, Steve Donahue has been talking about making a 20th century canon or a modernist canon between the end of World War II and the present day. Um, well, look, we all know what's going to be on there, right? Okay. Those are my thoughts. Tell me what you think. Is there something I'm missing? Do you want to hear me expound at great length on another booktuber? Um, you know, what do I think about Michael K. Vaughan's collection of hats? I don't know. Let me know. Thanks for watching.